What is up, Bitcoiners? This is CK, and this is another episode of the Bitcoin Magazine podcast. This week, I sit down with Edan Yago from the Soveryn Project. Soveryn is a decentralized group of people working together to build a decentralized trading platform, stablecoin platform, and other type of platform on top of RSK and other Bitcoin technologies. They're looking at Liquid, they're looking at Lightning, they're looking at DLCs. But effectively, this is a new kind of company that is not domained anywhere on the world, and they are building on top of Bitcoin. It's really exciting to see this kind of alternative companies emerging. I wrote an article called The Sovereign Company Thesis, and this group kind of fits along the line of organizations that will be enabled by Bitcoin and the assurances that Bitcoin provides. Before we get into the show, I want to talk about our sponsor. It is Level, lvl.co. Level is an awesome Bitcoin bank. Effectively, it is a FDIC insured checkings account right next to a Bitcoin wallet, and it allows you to trade between USD and BTC with no spread, and no fees, no hidden fees. It is straightforward, straight back and forth between USD and BTC, and they want you to live on Bitcoin. I know everyone made a huge splash about Russell Okun, who is taking 50% of his paycheck, immediately converting that into Bitcoin, and then putting that into his cold storage. LVL.co lets you do that today. You don't have to wait. You can get paid in Bitcoin today with LVL.co. You get an FDIC insured bank account. So, boom, with LVL.co, you get your paycheck in your bank account, and then you can convert it to Bitcoin automatically. They are rolling out features where you can set a percentage of your paycheck to immediately get converted into Bitcoin with no charge, no hidden fees. You guys, LVL.co, live on Bitcoin, bank on Bitcoin. This is a new kind of Bitcoin exchange. It's not a brokerage. LVL.co, use code BTC Media so that way they know we sent you there. All right, guys, that is enough for me. Let's jump right into this interview with Edan Yago of Soveryn. What is up, Bitcoiners? Welcome back to another episode of the Bitcoin Magazine podcast. This is CK, and I am sitting across from Edan Yago. He goes by Yago on Twitter and on the interwebs, and he is a fantastic Bitcoiner building some really cool technology on RSK. Yago, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be on the podcast of my favorite publication.
Amazing. Well, very kind words, and we work hard to be the most true to Bitcoin publication out there. So it means a lot that you say that.
Definitely.
So Yago, I guess really quickly, why don't you give us an introduction to yourself as well as your project, Soveryn?
Sure. So about myself, I got into Bitcoin. I was lucky enough to get into Bitcoin pretty early. I was working in network technology, building neural networks for a company I'd started back in 2011. And I was reading a lot of papers in like just about networking in general. And I came across this very bizarre paper called the Satoshi white paper. And it blew my mind and screwed up my entire life. I abandoned everything I was doing then and switched entirely to being in Bitcoin. And the reason was, I come from a family of political activists, people who have been chased down by governments or have had to fight governments. My family were survivors of the Holocaust and among the fighters in the Warsaw Uprising. And more recently, they fought against the apartheid government and were forced to flee South Africa. And I became a gold smuggler at the age of 9 because I had to get money to my family. And and so the list kind of goes on. So I was very primed. I'd grown up in circumstances where governments were rightly viewed with a great deal of suspicion. It's a lot of power, which can often be abused, and where we had seen capital controls and monetary surveillance, and how difficult it can be to maintain sovereignty over your own funds. And so when I came across Bitcoin, it just took over everything for me. It was like a realization that if we did this right, then 9-year-old boys wouldn't have to smuggle gold ever again.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible and humbling to kind of hear your real life experience, and I'm sorry that you've had to deal with that. But I feel like in 2020 and moving into 2021, never has it been more apparent to a Westerner, someone from the United States or Western Europe, that they too may have to face similar sort of adversaries in the government.
I think it's important to remember that in 1936, right, when Hitler was elected in Germany, Germany was considered the most advanced democracy in the world by many people. The Weimar Republic was considered, a model of freedom and liberalism. And when the United States confiscated gold from every single American citizen during the Roosevelt regime, that happened in the land of the free and home of the brave. We're not that different from the generations that have come before us. And as solid as our foundations may seem to us, the institutions that we live in are extremely fragile, and complacency is a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're going to get much more into this later on in the conversation. But before I get into that, I want to learn more about Sovereign. You guys recently had some pretty big news that hit the Bitcoin news reel. What are your, give me your get me up to date on Sovereign and what's up with this project.
Well, what I think of Sovereign as sort of Bitcoin with superpowers. So if you think about Bitcoin provided us with this decentralized, censorship-resistant, permissionless monetary system. Amazing, right? Now, on top of this monetary system, what we should do is we should build a decentralized, permissionless, uncensorable financial system, one which isn't manipulated, one which is free and open to anyone in the world. And if we do that, then we can build on top of that a decentralized, permissionless, and censorship-resistant economic system, which would mean that we could all transact globally with anyone freely. So that's, I think, what our mission is. It's, I think, a multi-decade mission. I think all of us together, we can get excited about price go up, but Bitcoin is kind of like a political movement dressed up as a get-rich-quick scheme, and we're all in this together, fighting to be on the right side of history. So coming back to Sovereign, what Sovereign is trying to do is take that uncensorable monetary system and build upon it an uncensorable financial system. And so Sovereign is a decentralized, permissionless, and censorship-free system which allows you to lend Bitcoin, borrow Bitcoin, trade against other tokens, create Bitcoin-backed stable coins, and take leverage. And so it allows you to do, I think, the two things which excite me most about it in terms of use cases is one thing which I call super stacking, which is, you're stacking your sats. All right, so now you can lend out those stats as you're hodling them and stack even more sats on the interest that people pay you. Now, if you do that through a centralized service, you're taking on a lot of risk. But if you do it while controlling your keys through a censorship-resistant system, then I think you're participating in this financial space and earning more for yourself. And then there's hyper hodling, which is I'm all in Bitcoin, but I still want more Bitcoin. So how do I do that? Well, I'm buying Bitcoin with my Bitcoin, and I do that by basically using my Bitcoin to borrow dollars and buy more Bitcoin with them. And so I'm growing my stack despite the fact that I'm all in. And that's basically why I got excited about helping to build Sovereign, was because I wanted to use it.
Right. So, I mean, obviously, these are kind of like leverage strategies that Sovereign is enabling through RSK and other blockchain technologies. I want to like dive into, you guys are not the only ones doing this kind of activity and enabling this kind of stuff. This stuff lives on ETH as well as other, quote unquote DeFi applications. But kind of before getting into any of that, I want to talk about RSK. Why is Sovereign built on RSK? What is it like building on RSK? I guess, are there misconceptions about RSK and any like, kind of talk about RSK and Sovereign's
Yeah.
relationship to that?
So Rootstock, or RSK, is a sidechain of Bitcoin, which is merge mined by Bitcoin, which means that it basically extends the functionality of the Bitcoin network itself, right? So it provides the ability to build smart contracts, to have different types of transactions, and it's all backed by Bitcoin proof of work. Now, Sovereign isn't building on Rootstock only. We're integrating Lightning Network, and we would, we're looking at other types of layer 2 technologies like other Bitcoin sidechains, DLCs. I think there's a really exciting explosion, a renaissance of Bitcoin layer 2 technologies that is happening now. Rootstock is a very good place for us to start because it gives us a great deal of smart contract functionality. And what a smart contract is basically a way for you to interact with other people, where the interaction is governed by code rather than governed by courts. And so it's much more efficient, much more permissionless, and much more global. And that means that we can build a system which can serve anyone in the world.
Yep, yep. I mean, I actually am fairly familiar with everything that's happening in the Ethereum and in smart contracting space. So I'm interested in kind of getting into the nuances with you on this. But it also is interesting to hear about, Sovereign is just trying to build a layer two for Bitcoin. And this is not necessarily a smart contracting play or a DeFi play, but rather it's about, integrating with all of Bitcoin's, kind of potential L2s. Can you kind of give me like a better idea of like Sovereign as an entity or Sovereign as an organization, like what that, looks like?
Sure. It's more of a disorganization than an organization. So Sovereign is the most fun I've ever had in my life because we're building a business, right? It's this thing which people work on and contribute to, and it generates money through transaction and trading fees. But there's no corporation, there's no company, it's not registered anywhere. The only thing that turns it into a business and that binds all of these people together is the protocol and the token which is associated with the protocol, which is called SOV. Now, a lot of Bitcoiners are really opposed to tokens, which I get, because most of the tokens that have existed up until now have been altcoins, right? They've been sort of tokens that have tried to be coins or currency and effectively compete with Bitcoin. SOV is nothing like that. It is a very, very simple idea where a system generates revenues, people who contribute to the system earn SOV, and then they can earn back the revenues that the system is generating. And so that creates a way to govern the
And that's
system.
not denominated in BTC.
Yeah, so all of the transaction fees, all of the trading fees, everything that occurs in Sovereign is in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the currency. SOV you can think of as kind of like equity, right? It's kind of like having a share or a stock in this decentralized business.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bitcoiners are very anti-token as a reaction to altcoins being compared to Bitcoin. But I do think that, I mean, even through DeFi on Ethereum, this idea of token as this way to accrue cash flow from a protocol um, has started to open people's minds up to the potential of organizing in the future, not necessarily competing with Bitcoin. I actually wrote an article a couple weeks ago for Bitcoin Magazine called "The Sovereign Company Thesis." I don't know
Oh,
if you took a
really?
look at that. Yeah,
I haven't. I should. That is a really coincidental name, right? So
yeah,
we are
no.
the Sovereign Company. Maybe we are your thesis.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you are an instantiation of it, but the idea is, as existing companies adopt Bitcoin, they're like, they may be buying it as a store of value or a alternative treasury asset or whatever, people are saying now in the mainstream, but they inadvertently become more sovereign as well, and if they do actually hold their keys, then they truly have a level of sovereignty and leverage over the state that was never quite possessed by entities before. So I
That's
just think
right.
that that's changing the game, whether it's new organizational structures like Sovryn, like your organization, or whether it's an Apple or something like that in 15 years in a Bitcoin world. It's
Yeah.
just changing. It's changing the rules.
Well, in a way, I think what we think we are building is kind of like the Apple for finance in the future, right? So it just works. Everything is like nicely we put a lot of emphasis as a community on UI, on user friendliness, and on making sure that all of the different parts, so lending, trading, leverage, stablecoin generation, perpetual swaps, they all integrate very, very smoothly and tightly with each other as one protocol, which is a bit different from what happens in the Ethereum space, where you've got so many different DeFi dApps, and they're all kind of competing with each other and doing liquidity mining to kind of steal liquidity from each other. We think that if you build an open protocol, you can build it in such a way that it's open to everyone, and there doesn't have to be this battle over liquidity. It can concentrate everyone's liquidity. And because the biggest pool of liquidity is Bitcoin, uh, by far, we think that that's the best place to be building these decentralized applications. So, we can trade ERC20 tokens, we can trade other tokens as well, and they will be added by the community over time, probably more and more rapidly as more people learn to do this. And eventually, I think there's not going to be anything which won't be tradable on Sovereign.
Okay, well, so let's talk about um, what you would consider sovereign, because I want to get like a real understanding of like the organizational kind of structure of sovereign and how the token is minted. Who controls those multi-sigs or the keys to that, whatever smart contract issues that. Like, let's talk about like
Those are
what
great
this thing
questions.
actually is.
Yeah, so Sovereign doesn't have a multi-sig. Well, actually, it doesn't have a multi-sig. Right now, I think we still have like a safety multi-sig, which we're in the process of removing, just in case everything goes very, very wrong in the very first days. But Sovereign is governed purely by the tokens. There's no central operator. There's not even a multi-sig operator. And the way it works is, if you're trying to build a company, right? People have shares in the company, and they vote for a board of directors, and the board of directors kind of make decisions, right?
Yep.
And the shareholders can participate in those decisions at any time. So Sovereign is a little bit similar, but it's got some interesting twists. When you hold SOV token, you can choose to stake your SOV token. So you don't get to vote unless you're staking. And this is because the more you stake, in other words, the longer you stake for, not the more you stake, the longer you stake for, the more voting power you get. And this is because as Bitcoiners, we have low time preference, and we want to make sure that people are incentivized to think about the very long term of the project. And so by locking up their funds without the ability to withdraw those funds for 2 years, 3 years, they're forced to think about the long term of the project, and they're rewarded with a greater share of the revenue and a greater share of the voting power. Now, they're also pseudonymous, so you don't know who they are. And instead of a board of directors, they have the ability, if they choose, not the obligation, but the ability to delegate their votes to people in the community or addresses in the community that they like, or that they think have the right opinions or have a good track record of voting. And then the protocol can vote to do many things, but not anything. It can't vote to take away anyone's funds. It can't vote to censor anyone's transactions, but it can vote to add new features. It can vote to change some parameters like fees, like the fee structure of trading or of lending, and can vote to spend treasury on new development or to pay the salaries of pseudonymous developers. And most of our developers are pseudonymous. In fact, most of them have chosen like superhero names. And I think that's because like one of the very earliest founders, Aurora Monroe, she chose, Aurora Monroe, which is the actual name of Storm, the X-Men character. And we have like an internal meme in Sovryn that we're not Bitcoin maxis, we're Bitcoin mutants. We're giving Bitcoin superpowers.
I like that. I mean, so I generally spend most of my time talking to quote unquote Bitcoin maximalists, but I do a podcast called POV Crypto where I talk to David Hoffman, who's a pretty big ETH head influencer.
Yeah,
and
David
DeFi
Hoffman of
proponent.
ETH is money fame. So I think we have a huge amount of respect for what has been done on Ethereum, and Ethereum has been such a great petri dish for experimenting with DAOs, with DeFi, with decentralized stablecoins, with really how to take apart our financial system and reconstruct it in a way which is censorship resistant. And no one should be more interested in what's going on in Ethereum than Bitcoiners for exactly that reason. And I think that's what Bitcoin mutants are. They're open-minded Bitcoiners who believe that we've got, on the one hand, the greatest store of value asset that's ever been created, and the greatest monetary tool that's ever been created. And on top of that, we have the opportunity to build an open financial system and an open economy. And that's our mission.
So I like the I like the X-Men alignment and calling yourself the mutants and stuff like that. I vibe with it because my perspective on Bitcoin is Bitcoin, shitcoins, all of this stuff, like all of this is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the permissionless money network that people can build on top of, and you can't stop someone from doing it wrong. You can't stop someone from forking it. You can't stop someone from building an altcoin. You can't stop someone from, shitcoining to hear the moon and back. You can't. And Bitcoin made this. As much as Bitcoin made, the perfect money, it also made all of this other stuff. So it really helps to kind of open your eyes to, Bitcoin is permissionlessness. I'm hopeful that other like hardcore Bitcoiners, people that understand the value of Bitcoin, the difference between a Bitcoiner and an altcoiner is Bitcoin their unit of account? Truly, like if you don't get that Bitcoin is the alpha and the omega, then you're lost. But if you get that Bitcoin is the alpha and the omega, you can kind of do whatever the hell you want. Like it really doesn't matter. And Bitcoin enabled that.
Yeah, and I think Bitcoin, is built on the idea of adversarial thinking and innovation. And so as adversarial thinkers and as innovators, we should be looking at the entire ugly shitcoin universe and saying, all right, well, in this pile of shit, are there some diamonds? And if there are any diamonds, we should snatch them up. And that's I think what we're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that Bitcoin is doing that, whether the Bitcoin maximalist community, thinks about it or not. Bitcoin is a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, that's right.
So, I mean, tell me a little bit more, like, how did you find Sovryn, and kind of what's your role in Sovryn?
Well, when the pandemic started, I had this idea to try and get Bitcoin branded 3D printed masks to people around the world, because supply chains had broken down and a lot of people were without masks, if you remember, like February and March. And so I got together with a bunch of Bitcoiners like who I'd known for years, and we started working on that project, which we called Block 19, and we built a distributed network, and we created this Bitcoin-backed NFT, so that people could donate masks and track where their masks donations were going, right? And in the course of that, we started talking about, you know, the things that we were excited about still, and like what we were disappointed about in the Bitcoin world. And one of the things that really bothered us is that for years and years and years, we'd always expected, like we had known for sure that someone was going to build a decentralized, censorship-resistant alternative to all of these exchanges. And for Bitcoin, it just hadn't happened. And so eventually, I think we just said, screw it, we're going to do it ourselves. And we started working on it. And now Sovryn's live.
Gotcha. And you mentioned there's a founder of Sovryn. Like, how did you bump into the founder? Is the founder still there?
I've known Aurora for many years. She has an amazing story. She got into Bitcoin because she was waitressing, and she knew some guys who were selling drugs on the dark web, and they couldn't get, so they were getting like a bunch of Bitcoin from selling these drugs, but they needed cash, and she was a waitress, so she had a lot of cash, and she created this union of waitresses who would give her cash, and she would then pay them like more cash back the next week, because what she would do is she would take this cash and buy Bitcoin at discounts from drug dealers, and then arbitrate it from Mount Gox and other exchanges. And then she got into, so she's a programmer, and she got
Bitcoin
into
OG right there.
Yeah,
that's like the original arbing with Bitcoin. I love it.
Yeah, so you know, I know her, and then there's JB Bedrocks, who I met through her, and they both have been like coding smart contracts on Ethereum for the last 5 years because they got really excited about the opportunity there. And Victor is just like this amazing front-end developer who's super into making like the best user experiences, and he's been building like Bitcoin wallets, and you know, we just kind of know each other from the space, from all of the years that we've been, like, the community was pretty small back then, so you kind of know everyone. And we're all like super excited about the project, and more people are joining. We've got like tens of people now contributing to the project. It's crazy. Yeah, it's like spreading like wildfire.
So this project Sovryn started like at the beginning of the pandemic, essentially like summer, right? And
that's right.
You've launched an exchange on RSK. You have a token that is paid out per people's work, and you're looking into all kinds of Bitcoin, kind of technologies in order to build out the Bitcoin denominated layer 2 world financial stack.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So I guess one last question. Can you tell me tell me a little bit of details on like the token supply of SOV and like how that was all kind of like done and that kind of shit. And then from there, let's talk into like what's next.
So token supply of SOV was done in a pretty stupid way. Like, stupid. Like, I think it makes sense, but like we did it like, we just had like a online chat, and we were like, all right, how many tokens are there going to be? And someone said, well, there are 100 million tokens in 100 million sats in a Bitcoin, and people are going to be using this to stack sats. So 100 million tokens. So there are 100 million tokens, and they're distributed to developers and founders, about 35% there, about 15% to people who are contributing financially, and the rest will be distributed to go to the community, to the actual users of the system.
And like how are like the tokens distributed to the users of the system? Is it kind of like Politeia and Decred style? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, right now it's in the form of rebates on transaction fees. But we are working to add the ability for you to earn more SOV by what we call giving your friends the gift of sovereignty, right? So introducing them to Sovryn and having them become more self-sovereign themselves. So you'll get some SOV for that. And we may introduce certain elements of sort of like liquidity mining kind of things to encourage liquidity if there are any places which need more liquidity in the system.
Gotcha. Can there be more tokens voted in, kind of like a corporation? Is that something that is an option for the
Yes.
holders? Okay.
Yes. So we have created that. Well, or there's nothing stopping that from happening, and that's very important in terms of the way we view it, because this is not a competitive
Bitcoin.
debate. Yeah, it's not a competitive Bitcoin. It's like equity. It's like stocks. So like, let's say, you know, the main reason we have it is because we want to be able to incentivize, additional developers and partnerships in the future as a community. But also, the number one reason is the buck stops with the SOB holders, right? So if anything goes wrong with the system, like if something goes wrong with the centralized system, you maybe have someone you can sue, you can hope, you can call their customer service, right? So who does the buck end with a decentralized system? And the way we view it is it's the SOV holders. They're taking on the risk. That's part of what they're getting rewarded for. So like if there was a hack, the community could decide to pay back that hack by creating more SOV. So we're still working, and I think it's going to be a process to figure out exactly how to make that mechanism work in the best way possible. But it's an important part of our ethos is that we, as a community, are taking responsibility for the system.
Makes sense. I mean, again, a lot of that kind of fits into what other quote unquote DAOs are structured behind as well. MakerDAO kind of has something similar to that. Again, probably more familiar with all that stuff than the average Bitcoiner. So let's talk about, like, I'm a Bitcoiner. I'm listening to this podcast. I'm interested in like just messing around, seeing what's available. I know that you guys have a product hunt listing right now that's up. Like, how would someone go from I have Bitcoin in my Bitcoin wallet to I'm participating in, I'm leveraging the Sovryn exchange capabilities?
Yeah, so you need to have a wallet that is integrated with Sovryn. Right now, there are not too many. There's probably 6 or 7. So
which ones are they?
Well, Portis, Edge is one. I'm not sure if it's fully integrated yet. Our wallet, Defiant, MetaMask, Nifty, and a few others. Oh, and of course Ledger and Trezor, right?
So the RSK wallets, essentially. Things that work with RSK.
That's right.
Okay.
So you need to get your Bitcoin onto our system. What that means is you actually never, it's not like an exchange, you're never depositing your funds into our system, right? But it means that you need to get your funds into a wallet which is connected to our system, that talks to our system. But you can do that from any Bitcoin wallet. And the way you do that is we've built a system called the fast Btc Relay. And basically, when you connect your wallet, it will generate a unique address for you. You send Bitcoin there, and you'll then get rootstock Bitcoin on your wallet, which you can then use.
Yeah, it was a S Bitcoin.
I call it Bitcoin on rootstock or R Bitcoin, or
whatever. So and where are the like BTC keys being held, right?
The keys they're held in your wallet.
For the Bitcoin. Yeah. So you're holding both your Bitcoin keys, and how are they tethered to the roots? Like, I guess, can you talk about how, when you're sending your BTC, like your on-chain BTC keys to that address and getting back rootstock Bitcoin, where are your on-chain BTC keys? Or like, where are the private keys to those on-chain funds?
Yeah, just to kind of clarify, both of these are on-chain. One is on main chain and one is on side chain, right? So so you could have like 2 wallets, or you could have one wallet which knows how to talk to both, right? If you have one wallet which knows how to talk to both, then then it's super simple, and we're working to get more and more wallets integrated in that way. If you have 2 wallets, then you'd have like a private key here, and you'd have a private key here, and you'd move the Bitcoin basically from one private key to another. So they're always under your control, You basically move them from one wallet to another.
So I guess, but there's a mechanism for RSK to make sure that you're locking in real Bitcoins and that each
Yes,
RSK.
yes.
Yeah, can you talk about that?
So right now there's currently one peg on RSK, which is called the POW peg. It uses hardware secured modules. So basically, it POW HSMs, so special HSMs, which know how to read the rootstock blockchain, and you need to feed them. You need to provide them with an SPV proof of transactions. And so what you do is you send your funds into a multi-sig wallet, which is controlled by these HSMs. And then the funds are held there, and a new rootstock Bitcoin is created on the rootstock sidechain, right? And vice versa. So you can go in and out. And we're in the process of working to bring in other types of pegs as well. We think it would be good to have competition between different types of trustless pegs. So not like WBTC, which is fully custodial, but there's more than one way to build trustless Bitcoin pegs, and they have a little bit of different trade-offs. So different people might choose different ways that they want to get in to the system.
So there's the RSK blockchain that is merge mined to the Bitcoin blockchain, and then the organization behind RSK provides a service through secure hardware modules to peg in and out of
No, there's no
RSK.
organization. There's multiple different pegnatories, they're called. The different pegnatories have HSMs. In theory,
okay.
so right now, you know, it's not fully permissionless to become a pegnatory.
Yep.
But it's becoming more permissionless. And after Taproot is introduced into main chain, it should become possible to basically add an unlimited number of pegnatories. One of the reasons it's limited right now is because there are practical limits on how many signatories on a Bitcoin multisig you can have.
So who decides how to become a pegnatory for RSK?
Ultimately, it's going to be sort of like invite process where the pegnatories can invite additional pegnatories.
Okay. I mean, I like that a lot better than Liquid. And
yes. So look, I mean, Liquid is interesting, but I think it has a few disadvantages which made us less interested in working on Liquid initially. One is it's not fully permissionless to get on and off, right? So you have to go through an exchange, which means you're going through KYC, which we think makes it extremely prone to censorship. The second thing is rootstock has the advantage of being EVM compatible, so we can use a lot of the same tooling and code bases and learnings that Ethereum has built out over the years, whereas Liquid is still working on figuring out exactly how they're going to construct their smart contracting language, and that is a much more immature environment. I hope we'll see lots and lots of different efforts to build Bitcoin Layer 2. I mean, Bitcoin is going to be the entire economy, so I'm sure there's going to be thousands of different ways of building Bitcoin Layer 2, and we're planning with Sovryn to be interoperable with the best of them.
I like it. I mean, again, I don't know how every Bitcoiner listening to this podcast will react to some of the more out there ideas, but personally, I have a very cosmic view of the future and what Bitcoin, the permissionlessness of Bitcoin, what it enables. I'm not surprised that an organization like Sovryn has sprung up this year, and I fully expect many more to do the same. And I mean, if you look across the crypto space, Sovryn isn't unique. Many organizations have done this and coordinated it around a token and did a lot of stuff like they've been taking advantage of Bitcoin's permissionless features. So but it's awesomeness and a breath of fresh air to get the Bitcoin Mutants take on it.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, there is I do think that what we're doing is maybe spells the end of altcoins. because I think what we're proving, if we're successful, is that you really don't need all of these other chains. And I actually think that the only reason these other chains exist was because somebody wanted to make a different coin because they wanted to make value out of nothing, right? We already have a permissionless, censorship-resistant monetary tool. It's called Bitcoin. We don't need 1,000 coins. That doesn't make sense to me. It never has. And I think that the only reason it's ever made sense to anyone was, well, for two reasons. First, to some people it made sense because they thought they could sell something for nothing. And for other people, it made sense because they were convinced by the people who were trying to sell something for nothing that there were all these unique features in a alt chain which Bitcoin couldn't do, and therefore you needed a different currency for that chain. I think what we're proving is that you can add any superpower, anything which is useful in any way can be added to the Bitcoin ecosystem using Bitcoin as its core monetary, as its base monetary thing. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to have like a crypto asset economy. I mean, if people want to build real things, that's great. Like, build real things which use a token to tokenize, right? Everything that we use the courts to do and governments to do, we can use decentralized consensus to do, and tokens are the way of doing that. So we can build a decentralized, permissionless global economy. Just doesn't have to be made out of shit coins. It can be made out of real projects, and so I think we may see the death of altchains as a result of Sovryn and things like Sovryn succeeding, but we will definitely see a flourishing of the, I would call it the crypto asset space.
Okay, interesting take, and I think that's a great place to wrap up the episode. Why don't you plug yourself? Why don't you plug other places where people can learn more about Sovryn, and any last asks for what I would describe as probably, a much more hardcore Bitcoin maximalist audience?
Okay, so definitely check out sovryn.app. That's SOVRYN.app, which is the best way to connect. It's not the only way, but it's the best way to connect to the protocol. And then you can also check us out on Twitter. Our handle is Sovryn, SOVRYN, BTC, so Sovryn Bitcoin. And for the maximalists, I would sign off saying this: listen, the reason we got into Bitcoin, the reason we're excited about Bitcoin is because we want to build our own sovereignty, and we want to build a world in which individuals can be sovereign. We want to build a global, permissionless, censorship-resistant, open economy. And the way we do that is by building around Bitcoin, building on top of Bitcoin, and strengthening Bitcoin by building an economy around it. And that economy can't be centralized, which means we can't rely on the courts. So we need to rely on the blockchain. And the way we do that is by tokenizing the different functions. So this is the future, not of altcoins. It's the future of Bitcoin, and hopefully the future of the world.
Awesome. And Yago, where can people find more about you?
I'm Edan Yago, at Edan Yago on Twitter, or you could just look for Yago and like, if you look for the hashtag Stay Sovryn, SOVYRA, Sovryn, I can't spell, Stay SOV RYN, you'll find me.
Okay, awesome.
And on that note, I'll tell everyone, stay sovereign, everyone.
Yes. Hey, stay humble, stay sovereign, and keep stacking. You can find me at CK_snarks, and you can find the podcast at Bitcoin Magazine, on Telegram, on YouTube, anywhere you download the podcast. Make sure to download it. Make sure to follow these guys. Bitcoin is it's gonna make some crazy stuff possible. So stay open-minded to what sovereignty looks like. Peace.